What we're going to talk about today, Rachel?
What is the worst piece of management advice you've ever been given? And what's the right advice that that person should have given you?
I was having some performance management issues with somebody, and it was get rid of them. How long have they been here? Is it less than 2 years? Get rid of them. Just get rid of them. It's like, well, maybe we should work with that person rather than just cut them loose to be somebody else's problem. It triggered all of my instincts of developing people and being an empathetic, caring human being. It felt bizarre that was the advice I was receiving.
I have also received that exact same advice, but of somebody who was actually quite a long-standing member of staff, and it was a very senior, like the overall leader of the area of work, who, yeah, it was just like, well, how long are they off for? Like this person had long-term sick absence. How long have they been off for? How long are they going to be off for? And I was like, well, it's a mental health concern, so it's not like appendicitis, it's not like they have an operation and then they have a couple of weeks of recovery and then they're back. Like, we don't know. Just get rid of them. And in the end, because I didn't just get rid of them, they went direct to HR and the person was invited to leave, and then very soon after that was not employed at the institution anymore. So same, I don't think it was, I think it was done legally. Like, I don't think that was the issue, but it was just that same thing about, but don't we give a shit about this person? Oh, okay. Clearly you don't give a shit about them. Fine. What
Wow.
about you, Rachel? What's yours?
Well, I was thinking a bit more pragmatically about the worst advice I was given, and I think I've not been given much advice on being a manager, to be contextualize this. Like, who has? Everyone's just winging it. But definitely the most unhelpful thing was to be the manager that I would have wanted, because that takes you down a route of not reflecting on the individuals around you. You just think about what you want the whole time, and you think, I would want to be let loose and do and have like no oversight in this thing and just be required to commit to provide the deliverables. Or I would be happy to have this challenge and go ahead and do something at that level without much training. I'd just work out myself, or I'd be happy to do this on my own. And I had, early in my career, really tense, difficult conversations with staff members who were like, "You're not supporting me," because I wouldn't have wanted that level of oversight. So I was like, well, why would anyone want that level of oversight? So not that I get where the sentiment comes from, the idea that you want to not, to reflect on things that are positive about what you like about a manager, but it doesn't help to think about just what you want, because actually everything you want is not necessarily what someone else wants. And I've had to kind of really actively think about the idea as well that you can't have one approach. That, which is the other consequence of that kind of philosophy. If you try and be the manager that you want, you're only thinking about one dimension of management or one aspect of it. Because in a team, you have to be a different manager to each of those individual team members. So while at the time I thought it was really, really helpful, it got me not very far, I have to say, before I found it got me stuck, really stuck. And it took a while for me to have that realization that I couldn't be the kind of manager that I would want, because none of these people were me. I needed to be what they needed. I needed to listen to them more. And I was so determined not to be a bad manager. I have many experiences of poor management that I experienced, particularly early in my career. I was so desperate not to do that. And I knew the things that I hated about what they had done. And micromanagement was one of the things I experienced a lot of. So I was so determined not to be like that, that I didn't stop and think that some people require more structure and guidance and reassurance. And I would just be like, just do it. Like, what's the problem? Just go and work it out. And wouldn't necessarily put the scaffolding around it. So while I think it was I'm going to say well-intentioned. I don't know if that it was well-intentioned. I think it was kind of ignorant in its own way. But for me, I think it delayed a lot of my learning and progression as a manager because I wasn't being reflective enough and I wasn't thinking about other people. And really good management involves humility and reflectiveness. So if you spend the whole time thinking about what you want, that's not going to get you far. Is it time for another cat cameo?
Go out this time. Get out.
So, cat evacuation.
Don't worry about that. Full disclosure, I have given that advice in the comment. Now, so I posted it on LinkedIn a little, like not that long ago, actually, in a moment of whimsy, and then got hammered in the comments by people saying exactly that. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, good point. Like that was a really lazy post.
It works on it's almost like, it's the absolute baby steps of management. Like it's the absolute basics of, if you wouldn't like this to happen to you, then maybe think about whether someone else would want it to happen to them. But there are things that I will do now with staff members in terms of managing them that I would absolutely hate. Like I would say, don't ever, that's not how I would ever want to be managed. But it's what they want and what works for them and what works for us as in a working partnership. And that's a really big step. So maybe that'd be the manager you want, is that like first step towards reflection. Maybe it's thinking about a starting point, isn't it? But I think if people just stop there and don't move past it, it's going to be a problem longer term.
I think for me, it's like the spirit of it was more like, I would want a manager who was reflective and thoughtful and situational and all of those things. And so that in me, it was like I had just failed to think about the fact that that's not what everybody thinks of as their answer to that prompt.
Yeah. And even that not everyone wants those things in a manager. Some people just want a manager who gives really clear instructions, or a manager who tells them what to do. Like actually some people don't think you're used to thinking reflectively about it. So maybe not thinking about it. But I think that it's more perhaps a reflection of our approach more broadly to management, this idea that there is a one size fits all approach to things. It's just, and that it's quite easy, that doesn't take much effort or reflection, that you don't need to adjust it to different people, when of course you absolutely do. And that's where the whole challenges around like equity and equality come in, because you spend a lot more time with some staff than others, and you can be just as supportive to two staff members but have to spend twice as much time with one than the other, but both is getting what they need from you. And from an external perspective, that can look
very different.
Off. Yeah.
One of the concepts that really stuck with me was this idea about the shadow that you cast, and to be aware of the shadow that you cast, that your team are operating in. So if you're in a bad mood and you're slamming doors and grumbling and swearing, that can really affect the people around you. And as a manager, that effect is even more so, that you really have to be conscious of what you're projecting onto your people and moderate that. That's always in the back of my mind, is particularly when I'm having a very off day, and like the last week was a particularly stressful period, and I think one of my colleagues who normally sits at the very far end of the open plan to me, who right now we're just opposite each other. I think she was very surprised at some of the very colorful language coming out of my corner of the room as I came off calls going, honestly, people.
We all have bad days and things like that. I think the helpful thing for staff is to kind of acknowledge it right from the off. Like if I'm really, in one of those things where I know I've just not got the patience that I would normally want to have, I would try and like flag that to the, like, especially if I was in the office, be like, I'm just feeling quite short temperature and everything, so I'm just, please be mindful that if I seem a bit snappy, that it's definitely not you, it's me. And if we say it up front, then at least we're kind of acknowledging it. One of the worst managers I ever had, or the most challenging management relationships I ever had, they were a pretty crap manager. I don't know why I'm trying to be diplomatic, but were so erratic, and that at its foundation was probably the most awful thing about their management. It was that on one day you'd get one answer, and if you'd ask the same question on a different day, you'd get a different answer, and they would backtrack on things. So they would say, well, they challenge why you'd done something, you'd say that's what you said to do, and then they would say like, oh, I never told you to do that, or that's not what I meant, or whatever. And that constant like undermining and disruption was awful, and it really knocked all these people's confidence. You start second guessing. It's gaslighting, basically. You start second guessing yourself, and then when you add it into the simultaneous like micromanagement, but of things like, they would set a rota. This was when I worked. I was, when course registration enrollment was, a massive like on-campus activity that everybody got involved in, and they would come up with a rota, and they would make a rota based on who knows what logic about when people might be available without checking with anyone. Put this rota together, and then if you wanted to swap a session because you had another meeting to go to, or you had a medical appointment, or you didn't work that day, they would make it really, really complicated. You couldn't just go and swap with someone like by mutual agreement, like adults. You had to find someone who might be available, then go and ask this manager for permission if they would kindly swap you over and explain why. And then I changed jobs, and we had to do the same exercise again, as every year. And the manager was just came in and said, oh, we've got the final dates and times for all the sessions and everything. So I set up a document. So if you could put all your names in by Friday, make sure it's, distributed out equitably. And I was like, we should do it ourselves. And then I thought, why am I getting excited over a rota? but there's nothing like a rota to bring something into sharp reflection, really, is there?
It's that agency, isn't it? It's having the mission to just do your job and be treated like an adult. I had a colleague many, many, many years ago when I was at the beginning of my career. I had a pre-HE, but I think it's a universal truth that this person had a very fiery temper, and we were a really small team, a really small office, and this person saw themselves as one of the co-founders, even though they were not an owner of the business, and absolutely saw nothing wrong with screaming, shouting, throwing things, kicking doors, letting all their frustration out on the quivering mess in the corner, and this chap was a very small, slim guy. He wasn't physically imposing, but I found behavior so intimidating. And so I had said something to our mutual boss at one point, the owner, and she took it up with him at a later date. And he was absolutely shocked that anyone could find him intimidating. I mean, look at the size of me, there's nothing wrong with me. And, it was like, they just couldn't believe that I would feel physically afraid to be in the same room with them when they were having a meltdown. It was just this like huge temper tantrum, like a toddler. And we actually lost suppliers who refused to take orders from him anymore because of the abuse that they would get if things didn't go his way. And it was it was a really formative experience, I think, of that. Talk about the shadow you cast, especially in a small team, how that.
But also a reminder, Kelly, that when you when we overthink things about how we might have responded a little bit sharply or a bit abruptly to something, and we agonize over it, overthink it, talk to all our friends about it, stay up at night stressing about it, most people just do not have that level of insight. So really just need to let it go. You have to have a level of confidence that sort of like slightly separates away from yourself. But that's also gaslighting. By that person that you described, they're saying like, oh, why would anyone find me intimidating, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. They do find you intimidating. Accept and reflect. Don't like resist. The particular manager that I mentioned about the micromanaging and the sort of constantly being inconsistent, the biggest challenge we had there was we escalated. I mean, I walked into pre-existing historic long-term problems, but we raised them multiple occasions with the manager's manager, who didn't like this person either, who thought this manager was terrible. But his way of approaching it, just, I don't want to hear it, go away. Like, I don't want to deal with this person, so I'm not going to, and just let us, watch it happen. And people used to say, oh, that manager, the senior guy, oh, he's not as bad as the other one. I'm like, no, he's worse because he lets it happen. He is the manager of this person. He is watching and allowing this behavior to go on, and not doing anything. And I've seen that manager literally walk past altercations, like not step in to not help his junior, often female staff being like verbally and aggressively harassed. It would just like slope off back around the corner and like, I don't want to get involved in this. So wouldn't go there with advice from him. It was his advice. Be the kind of manager you want to be. Are you? I wanted to say to him. Are you, sir? Are you the kind of manager that you would like to have?
Yeah.
I bet you aren't.
We'll have the best advice in the next episode.
Cool.
Bye.
See you then.